How do you establish trust when building relationships?
Trust is the result of something. You can't tell people, trust me. Trust cannot be formed overnight, just as you can't go on one date and decide if you want to marry someone. I mean, it doesn't, you might have lust, but there's no real trust. The best definition of love I ever heard is that you can give someone the power to destroy you and trust that they won't use it. And that's kind of what trust is. It's this deep love, and it comes over time, and it comes from taking lots of little risks. Exposing yourself to more danger, making yourself feel more vulnerable, sharing something personal, putting yourself in a position where you have to turn your back and hope somebody won't stab you or steal your stuff. I mean, this is what trust is. It is the result of you making someone feel safe and them making you feel safe, and it's that dance. And that's what it can't be one-sided. And it's like dating. It's like getting to know someone. It's like making friends. It does not happen overnight. And it's a dance of give and take, give and take, give and take, give and take. And when you feel that person will make you feel safe, trust will emerge. It's not an app. It's not a switch. It's not something you turn on. It's something that evolves. You start to feel it. And then one morning you wake up and you're like, I totally trust that person. You're not sure exactly what happened to get you there, but you found yourself there.
Hey, good morning, everyone. If we haven't had a chance to meet yet, we still haven't. My name's Garry. I'm one of the pastors here. Really glad that you decided to choose to spend some of your day with us today. As the band, or as Russ mentioned, we're in a series called Who, where we're trying to track along with Jesus' life to find out who he really is. And the whole purpose of this journey, this adventure that we've been on since back in December, is to get to know Jesus better than we currently do, so that we begin to trust him in all aspects of our life, when things are going great and when things are going not so great. Okay, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. If you were to ask an expert in relationships what the single most important element is to a relationship, they would invariably say this: trust. It's trust. They say trust is the foundation for any relationship. And lack of trust is the main reason relationships fall apart. Whether that be a familial relationship between, say, a parent and a child, siblings, aunts, uncles, all that type of stuff. Whether it's a relationship, a friendship, a marriage. Trust is at the very foundation of those relationships. And without it, relationships won't last. And so the idea I'm going to throw out for you today is this: the same holds true when it comes to a relationship with God. Namely, that without trust, there is no relationship. Now, to help us kind of get into the dynamics and a feel for the dynamics of trust in the context of a relationship with God, there's no better place to look than the Bible, because the Bible is God's revelation of who he is to those who read it. That's what it's mainly about. It's just like, this is who I am. So we're going to look at a story that happened right after the story that we looked at last week. It's the one where Jesus fed between 5,000 and 15,000 people, depending on how you want to do the estimate. And he did it with this young boy's sack lunch that was made up of a couple of tiny fish and 5 small loaves made of barley bread. Now, if you missed that message, you can catch up online, so don't feel like, oh, I missed that message, because I'm going to give you a quick recap on what happened in that story, because it sets us up beautifully for what happened next, okay? So you may remember from last week, Jesus and his closest followers had been out all day teaching and healing people. Jesus himself had found out that his cousin, a guy named John the Baptist, the guy that baptized Jesus himself, had just died in prison. He was beheaded. And so all of them, right from Jesus right on down, they're all feeling exhausted emotionally, physically, and they just wanted to get away from it all. And so they hop in a boat and they roll across this lake and get to this beach where they start to make their way up this hillside, thinking, oh, finally we can be alone. But this crowd followed them. They spotted them and said, hey, there they are, and they followed because they wanted to hear Jesus teach. And so Jesus and his closest followers just sit down and they think, oh man, finally we can kick our feet up and kind of take it easy. And they look, and there comes this crowd. It's coming up the hill. And his closest followers, all his disciples are going, you got to be kidding me. Like, Jesus, send them away. Like, tell them to just go away. Tell them you're done. But Jesus doesn't. He starts to teach them. He starts to talk with them. And they're hanging on every word he says. And before they know it, most of the day's gone. It's starting to get late. And so Jesus, his close followers are kind of like hinting at him, it might be time to wrap this up. You know, it's getting late. Some of these people traveled a long way to get here. They're hungry. So just send them away. And Jesus is like, they're hungry? Well, we better feed them then. And that's when they said, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Jesus, but it would take a lot of money to buy enough food to feed this crowd. The only thing we have is, this little boy's lunch. I mean, that's barely enough for us, let alone this whole crowd. Just tell them to go. And that's when Jesus looked at them and said, well, tell you what, have the people sit down, bring me what we have, I'll give thanks for it, and we'll eat. They're kind of, okay. So they did, and they had all the people sit down, and they brought Jesus the food that they had, and Jesus prayed over it. And then Jesus said, okay, go feed the crowd. And he started walking out in the crowd, and they're feeding people thinking, we're not going to get very down the first row here, and we're going to run out of food. But the food just kept coming. And the people, they ate, and they ate, and they ate. And finally they're like, oh, I don't want any more. I've had enough fish. I've had enough bread. I'm full. I don't want any more. And then Jesus said, okay, go pick the leftovers up. And they're like, leftovers? You got to be kidding me. So they go out and they fill 12 baskets full of leftovers. One for each of them. It's like they have their own doggy bag. It was like a miracle, right? Which it was. And you can imagine his followers, as this is all unfolding, turning back and looking at Jesus and giving them the thumbs up and going, way to go, man. Like, that prayer was really good. It's working. Look at it. Are you seeing this? Well, at the end of it all, Jesus said, everyone's full. It's time to go home. And the crowd started to disperse. And he grabbed his 12 closest followers, the ones that had traveled by boat with him, and he said, come on down to the beach. And they all head down to the beach, and he says, okay, I want you to hop in the boat, head across the lake, and I'll meet you on the other side. I'll catch up with you. And I'm going to just hang out. I just need some downtime. I want to go pray and just be quiet. And so they did. They hop in the boat. It's been a long day for sure, but they're so jacked up from what just happened. And you can imagine them sitting in this boat, rowing, thinking, talking to themselves, going, do you believe what just happened? Like, wasn't that awesome? Man, are we hooked up with the right guy or what? Like, this is good. You see, they believed that Jesus was someone special, that he was the Messiah, the anointed one of God, but they had a different picture of what that meant. They were thinking he was going to be this big military leader that was going to come out and push out the governing Roman government that was oppressing them and holding them captive. It's just like, this is the guy we want to be with. That's not who Jesus was. So that's the first part of the day. And then came the second part of the day. And it's in the second part where their trust, their belief, their thought of who Jesus was gets put to the test. Here's how John, arguably Jesus' best friend, recorded this event. It says, when evening came, his disciples went down to the lake where they got into a boat and set off across the lake for Capernaum. Capernaum was just a small town that was located on the other side of the lake. By now, he said, it was dark, and Jesus had not yet joined them. A strong wind was blowing, and the waters grew rough. Quick question for you. When is it you find out for yourself whether or not you trust someone? When is it when you find out for yourself whether or not you trust someone? Is it when you need them to come through for you in the clutch? When you need someone to have your back? Or is it when everything's fine and life's good? Is it during the good times or is it during the tough times? It's during the tough times, right in the storms. When the chips are down and you need someone to bounce an idea off or to see if you're missing something, to give you emotional support, whatever it happens to be. It's like, who can I trust with this? Who can I be vulnerable with, right? You could say storms are the great gut check of who we trust. And I'm going to throw this out for you to think about, including God. Storms are like a gut check on who we actually trust. And that would be including God. Here's why I say that. When times are good, and I know this is true for me, trusting God is pretty easy, right? When the sun's shining, the skies are clear, it's easy to thank God for the good job and the awesome salary that goes with it. It's easy to thank God for the kids and the white picket fence and the car and the boat, right? Your health. Not so much when the skies darken and the waves begin to build. Suddenly the whole idea of God and trusting in Him starts to fall apart. So what's that about? Well, again, I'm just going to throw this out for you to think about. I think it's because we bought into something that I don't think we really realize we bought into. And that something is this: that deep down, we believe that for God to be trustworthy, life should be smooth sailing. Deep down, we believe that, man, if I get trusting God, if I can do that, if life is smooth, that's what it's dependent on. The problem with believing that is it means you'll never have a real, authentic, honest, intimate relationship with God, because there is no such thing as a storm-free life. There isn't. We all face them. Varying degrees of size, but we all face them. Storms happen, which means if you can't trust God if there is a storm, you'll never trust God. And without trust, there will never be a meaningful relationship. It won't be transformational, it will be transactional. Your trust in God, my trust in God, can't depend on a storm-free life. It just can't. Because there's no such thing as a storm-free life. But I'm going to press this a little bit further, okay? I would even go so far as to say storms aren't even the issue. I would say the real issue is whether we can trust God with the storm. Can we trust Him with the medical report? Can we trust Him with the layoff notice? Can we trust Him with the eviction notice? Can we trust Him with the divorce paper, the custody papers? When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus approaching the boat. John is he doesn't use a lot of words to describe what was going on, but Mark, another close follower of Jesus, he was also in the boat, and he recorded this, and you can read this story in the book that's named after him. It's the second book of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, and he does it with a little more detail. Here's how he wrote this little bit. He said, at about 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them walking on the water. Yeah, in both accounts, Jesus showed up. But at 3 in the morning, these guys had been out there since dusk, like 6, 7 o'clock. It's now 3 in the morning. That's what, 7, 8, 9 hours? Have you ever felt like God was a little late responding to you? You know, God, I'm single. I have been for a while. Where's the girl? Where's the guy? What's going on? You know, God, we've been trying to have a child for years. We've tried everything. We've depleted our savings, and we're not getting any younger. What's going on? What's the deal? God, you know I've been laid off for months. The bills are stacking up. I'm getting late notices left, right, and center. I've applied everywhere. Where's the job? Like, why aren't you taking care of me? God, you know I'm depressed. I struggle with it. There's just this, I can't explain it, but there's this darkness that's surrounding my soul, and I just don't get it, and I can't seem to escape it. And this time it's lasted for weeks. How much longer? Whatever it is you're facing, man, in every one of those waitings, every one of those delays, do you ever feel like your relationship with and your trust in God takes a hit? Begins to erode? You begin to doubt and question? Or maybe you're listening this morning and you've learned that, yeah, trusting God means trusting Him, not only in the good times, but in the bad times, in the storms. But you believe that He's going to respond at the beginning of the storm. None of this 3 a.m. stuff. It's like if you see clouds at 5, you want Jesus out walking on the water at 6 or 7, right? But here's the thing. That isn't fully trusting God. And here's why. Because we are still looking to have things done our way and in our time. So we don't fully trust that God knows what's best for us or truly understands what we're going through. But here's a thought. Could it be that we're the ones that don't understand who He is and what He's like? I think that's a big takeaway from this story. You see, this isn't the first time that these guys, these men that have been following Jesus for a while, have been in the middle of a storm. They were in another storm, but unlike this one, Jesus was in the boat with them. Yeah, they're on the same lake. They're rowing across. Jesus said, we got to head to the other side. And so they're rowing across, and the winds come up, and this lake is famous for its sudden storms. And these guys most of them are seasoned fishermen, so they know what they're doing, and they're out in the middle of the storm, and they're thinking, this is bad. This is not going to end well. And so they're panicking. And so they start looking around for Jesus. Like, where is He? And so they find Him, and you know where they find Him? At the back of the boat, and He's praying. Like, no, He's not praying. He's sleeping. One of the writers that recalls the story, he said had his head on a cushion. I mean, he's just like, he's out. Kind of like me on a Sunday afternoon. And so they wake Him up yelling at Him like, do you not care that we're all going to die? And you can imagine Jesus kind of waking up and kind of rubbing the sleep out of his eyes, trying to get his bearings, looking around and going, what are you worried about? And then He commands the wind and the waves to stop. And they do. Everything calms right off. And what do? They look at each other, then look at Jesus, and they say, who is this? Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey Him. Remember, these guys have been following Jesus for a while. And they've had front row seats and seen Him do some amazing things, like turning water into wine, giving sight to the blind, mobility to the lame, hearing to the deaf. And the question is, why? I mean, part of it is, Jesus has compassion on us. And He doesn't want to see us suffer, and so He's healing these people, but there's something so much bigger going on. He was trying to show who He was. Don't look so much at what I'm doing, but who's doing it. I am God in the flesh. And these guys would have been completely familiar with the creation story found in Genesis, found in their ancient writings, where God brings order out of chaos. They would have remembered the line where it says, God's Spirit hovered over the water. And water for them in that culture represented chaos, confusion. And they knew that the only person, the only being that had control over that was God Himself. And I'm sure Jesus is going, come on, put 2 and 2 together. I just calmed the water. Come on, guys. But they didn't get it. But I find that encouraging. And here's why. It's not like I trust Jesus 100% of the time. Sometimes I'm not even close. Sometimes, if I'm up against something, I'll rely on my own abilities and my own resources. I'll try and figure something out. I don't want to bug God too much. But if I'm really honest, the reason I do that is because I don't trust that God's going to figure things out, bring resolution to whatever it is I'm facing the way I want it to. He might even ask me, I got to go apologize to somebody or forgive somebody. Like, oh, I don't want that. I don't trust God. I know better. Here's the thing, though. Getting to know Jesus is a process. That's why we always say around here, this is a journey. It's more than a journey. It's an adventure. And Jesus is okay if we don't get it right away. Those that were closest to him didn't get it. But he desperately wants us to understand who he is and get to know him better so that we will begin to trust him in every aspect of our life, even in the middle of a storm. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus approaching the boat, walking on the water, and they were frightened. Again, Mark, the other disciple that was in the boat, he gives us a little more detail on exactly how they were feeling. Here's what he said. But when they saw him walking on the water, Jesus, they cried out in terror, thinking he was a ghost. Totally get it. When's the last time you saw someone walking on the water, right? They were all terrified when they saw him. When Jesus showed up walking on the water, they missed him. They missed him. Even after all the miracles they had witnessed him do, they still couldn't or didn't connect the dots. They missed him. Their lack of trust led to a lack of vision. Instead of seeing Jesus everywhere, they couldn't see Jesus anywhere. You ever had that happen? Me too. Been there. Bought the t-shirt. They were doing what most of us do when we're facing an impossible situation. We looked at that last week. They were trusting in their abilities and their resources. Jesus didn't even come into the picture. And in this case, they were relying on their sailing skills, their ability to hang onto the rope tight, their life jackets. And you think Jesus would be like, oh, guys. But I love what he said next. Listen to this. He says, but he said to them, it is I. Don't be afraid. That phrase shows up all through the biblical narrative. Do not be afraid. Do not fear. But it's the phrase before that that's really interesting. The literal translation of when Jesus says, it is I, is the Greek phrase, ego eimi, which means, I am. Jesus used the same word that God used, the same name that God used to describe himself when he met Moses. There's a story of Moses, you may remember the story, 10 Commandments, parting of the Red Sea. God came to Moses and said, before all that happened, he says, I want you to go tell Pharaoh, the leader of Egypt, to let my people go. And of course, they had this back and forth. Moses is like, well, I can't do that. I'm just a shepherd. No one's going to listen to me. If I go there, who do I say sent me? And God said, tell them, I am sent you. Tell them I am sent you. So in essence, what Jesus is saying to his disciples that were there in the boat that night and to us today is, it is I am, the Creator God. Do not be afraid. Now this story doesn't say specifically, but at this point, it seems as though something changed for the disciples. Maybe it was, as they're rowing and looking at this apparition walking on the water, they looked down at the 12 baskets they had collected that were no doubt at their feet. And were reminded just a few short hours ago of this incredible miracle that Jesus did that they were a part of. And maybe when they looked at that, there was a click that some of the puzzle pieces clicked into place for them, and they had that aha moment. It's like, oh, I'm starting to put this together now, because check out what happens next. It says, then they were willing to take him into the boat. Then. Up till that point, they're kind of like, you better stay there. I don't know if I want you in on this. But then they were willing to let him into the boat. Could it be that the reality of who Jesus is, God himself, finally started to sink in? The question becomes, for you and for I, is, are you willing to let Jesus into your life, into your boat, into your challenge, into your worry, into your fear, into your concern, into your struggle? And the answer to that will be dependent on how much you trust him. Because trust is the linchpin of a relationship. So, do you trust him when the storms come? Do you trust him? Do you trust that he not only sees you in your struggle, in your challenge, but that he comes to you and is with you in them? Do you trust that? Do you trust that he will provide for you financially? Do you trust that he is there in the doctor's office with you? Do you trust that he's there as you wait for test results? Do you trust that he loves you and will never leave you, even though circumstances around you are screaming everything against that? Do you trust his solution? Do you trust his timing? Do you trust that he has your best interest in mind? Again, even those circumstances that you find yourself in say differently. Maybe you're tuned in this morning, and like the band sang earlier, you're stuck in a moment, and you just can't get out of it. You're tired, you're exhausted. You've been rowing for hours, and you've got nothing left, and you don't even know how much longer you can even hang on. If that describes you, then hear this. Focus on this. Know this, believe this, and trust this. Jesus is with you in your struggle. And as dark as things seem, it will not last forever. Listen to these words written by a theologian, Matthew Henry. He wrote a bunch of commentaries on the Bible. This is written over 100 years ago. And here's what he wrote in regards to this story that we looked at today. He says, though the night be dark and the wind high, we may comfort ourselves with this, that we shall be at shore shortly and are nearer to it than we think. Don't give up. Trust. John finished off his recollection of this incredible series of events with these words. Then they were willing to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the shore where they were heading. Now, some scholars say this was a miracle that was inside the miracle, that once Jesus hopped in the boat, they were magically, miraculously transported to the safety of the beach, and it was all over, and they were like, yeah, high five. But others suggest, and I tend to fall into this category, I think, that when Jesus climbed into the boat, that there was such a relief, such a knowing of who he was, such an infatuation with the fact that the Creator God was standing in the boat with them, that everything around them just faded away. And before they knew it, it was like, oh, we're on the beach, look at that. man, when the storms of life come barreling in, and they will, I mean, we're all in one right now. We have been for almost a year. And you experience the very natural feelings of anger and confusion and frustration, loneliness, exhaustion, helplessness, and hopelessness. Remember, Jesus sees you. He really sees you. He does. Trust that. Because he is God, and no storm is too big for him to overcome. And so I want to leave you with a challenge and a promise. Here's the challenge. The challenge is to take the words that I'm about to read to you, print them off, and stick them somewhere where you can have access to them. Put them in your wallet, put them in your purse, stick them on the visor of your car, or on your fridge, whatever. And when life comes at you, and you're starting to feel alone, and you're starting to question God, read these words. Make them kind of your go-to. And here's the words. Here's the promise. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed. Whatever you're facing, don't be dismayed. And I love this. I love how God personalizes this. For I am your God. I will strengthen you and I will help you. And I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Beautiful words. Really glad that you decided to tune in this morning. And if you've got something going on in your life and you just need to reach out and talk to somebody about it, we've got an awesome team of people online. Just click the prayer button. You'll be whisked off to a private chat room, and no one else will see it, just you and whoever's in there with you. And they'll talk with you, pray with you, whatever you need. Take advantage of that. I'm just really glad that I get to be on this adventure, this journey with you. Thanks for tuning in. I invite you to pray with me. God, I mean, we all would love a storm-free life. And sometimes we believe that if we hook up with you and start a relationship with you, that all that stuff just will avoid us, and we'll kind of be in this little bubble, and we're able to navigate through all these storms, and they won't hurt us. But that's not true. You yourself said, in this world you will have trouble. And so the question for us becomes, are we going to trust you when the world presses in on us, when life presses in on us, and it doesn't make sense, and we're hurting, and we're in pain, and we're doubting, and we're questioning, we're confused, we're angry, we're tired, that we can look to you and know that it's when we go through things like this and you show up in a miraculous way that we learn to trust you in the next one and the one after that. So whatever people are going through, maybe they're not going through anything right now. Maybe they're on the beach, they're in that calm, and that's awesome. But for those who are struggling right now, I just pray that they would take that step of trust towards you in a new, fresh way, that you would show up and just remind them that you are there, that they don't have to dismay. Thank you for loving us and being there with us, even when we can't see you. We pray this in your most awesome name. Amen.